Last time we looked at prominent Australian dance bands of the 20s. In this program, we'll look at the social setting of jazz and dance music in Australia. The vogue for dancing went from strength to strength after the First World War. Dancing had long been enjoyed by all Australians, but never before had it been embraced by so many. The atmosphere at a large dance was exciting, heightened by the antics of the musicians who abandoned themselves in the required ways. Australian Variety and Show World magazine of July 1918 described the dance.
While the music is moaning and the dancers are swaying, they get into action until the air is full of flying feet, grabbing hands and delighted exclamations, such as, "Oh boy," "Hold me tight," "Swing me dizzy," "Alexander's got a jazz band now," or similar exclamations of joy.
Goodbye to all care and to all sorrow. I'm pushing the blues out of my way. Life's gonna start all over tomorrow. Just telegraph my baby to say that I'm all wrapped up in sunshine underneath the sky of blue, 'cause I'm sailing on a sunbeam on my way to you. Not a cloud is gonna stop me, I'll be coming right straight through, 'cause I'm sailing on a sunbeam on my way to you. We're gonna get married and how? Too long we have tarried, it won't be long now. Set the wedding bells a-ringing, let the whole world know it's true, 'cause I'm sailing on a sunbeam on my way to you. I'm all wrapped up in sunshine underneath the sky of blue, 'cause I'm sailing on a sunbeam on my way to you. Not a cloud is gonna stop me, I'll be coming right straight through, 'cause I'm sailing on a sunbeam on my way to you. We're gonna get married and how? Too long we have tarried, it won't be long now. Set the wedding bells a-ringing, let the whole world know it's true, 'cause I'm sailing on a sunbeam on my way to you.
That was Des Tooley, an Australian lady baritone known as the Rhythm Girl, singing "I'm Sailing on a Sunbeam." You heard Frank Colgan on trombone and Beryl Newell on piano. The Footlights Star of June 1919 reassured readers that it was unnecessary to wear a dress cut above the knee, as a properly cut ankle-length dress could accommodate a jazz dancer, and that the jazz as taught in Australia was considerably more refined than that in America. Eric Pearce remembers some prominent dancers of the 1920s in Sydney.
We used to have couples dancing on the floor, and the two best-known couples that I knew were Jack Monda and Dulcie Culnane, and Sid Halliday and Lina Watson. And Stuart Dawson came to me and asked me if I could get him a couple to dance at Ambassadors. So I first of all asked Sid Halliday and Lina Watson. They used to dance in costume, and they put on a tango, and he'd do, you know, this, he'd apparently knock the girl about and stroll all over the place. And
where were they dancing at the Royal?
They were dancing all over the place.
Oh, at every hall sort of thing, every dancing
place. A different place they hire them.
Yeah.
And Stuart Dawson asked me if I could get him a couple. Well, I sent them along, but they said, "When do you want us?" He said, "I want you on Saturday night." Well, they had a permanent engagement on Saturday nights and they couldn't take it. So I sent Jack Irvine and Dulcie Culnane, and they used to dance beautiful frocks, and he'd be in a dinner suit and everything. And he said, "When do you want me?" He said, "Saturday nights." Well, he also had an engagement, But he said, what time? And we said, oh, about 10, half past 10. Well, his engagement would be over by then. Well, he danced there, and he danced there for months and months and months and months, every night, I think.
And they were paid to do this, were
Oh,
they?
yes. Yes, the first night, he said, I won't pay you the first night, it'll be a tryout, but he said, I'll give you, you get your tickets and your supper and a bottle of wine.
They paid in kind,
Yes.
not in money.
But when Jack Mondler and Dulcie Calmaine got going there, they opened a studio in William Street, Sydney, and they made a lot of money out of that place.
Teaching people to dance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, they left their job. They were, but Jack Mondler was a traveller, and Dulcie Calmaine worked at, in a shoe shop in King Street.
This is Des Tooley singing I'm Doing That Thing, accompanied by Cliff Clark and his Kookaburras, recorded in February 1931.
Losing my sleep, living on love. Every time I breathe, I need a kiss. Might as well be crazy as be like this. I'm starting to rave to start following through. I'm saving to trying to save, making you blue. Tell your mother just what I'm thinking of. I'm doing that thing, falling in love.
Intense interest was generated by dancing competitions, which were often decided by popular vote. Carl Maiden had a band at Coogee.
Now, we used to put on a contest for the best dancers.
Yes.
And have a voting. And they used to hire a bus to come from Bondi to Coogee to bring their gang over to vote for their people.
Oh, that's right. Stack the voting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one night at Coogee, there was a big contest on, and somebody, a couple won, that a certain crowd didn't want to win. And there was a brawl. I've never seen anything like it. By the time they got through, there wasn't one chair that stood up. Not one chair. Everything was broken. If they couldn't hit anybody over the head with it, they scratched it on the floor.
That was Tiger Rag by the California Ramblers in 1925. Red Nichols was on cornet. This is typical of the white style of jazz recording that was being imported into Australia in the mid-1920s. More dance halls and cabarets opened. In Melbourne, the Classy Embassy opened in 1925 and the Rex Cabaret in 1928. The building, which had formerly housed Worth's Circus and Menagerie, was miraculously transformed into the Green Mill.
The decorations are Dutch landscapes. The ceiling is the sky after the Turner School. A rainbow illuminates a small waterfall, and during waltzes, the ceiling is lit by futuristic stars.
The Green Mill was huge, so that when the main hall burned down in 1941, what had merely been the foyer was converted into the Melbourne Trocadero. An extra squad of police was called to control more than 3,000 people wanting to attend opening night in 1926. Dave Meredith played trombone in Tom Swift's band at the Green Mill.
That's the Green Mill, that's what it looked like.
Well, they had a big mill outside the front and everything?
Yeah, now in the winter time, you'd walk into this mill used to go round. In the winter time you'd go in and there'd be big fires, like artificial fires, electrical thing, and as soon as you come out of the Melbourne coal and get it all, it was just nice warm, you know.
Yeah.
Then in the summertime they had it all done out again, like the Arctic region, you know, with the snow mountains and these cold air coming in, eh? But the crowd that used to get there, so there'd be one crowd on the perimeter, on the outside. Then there'd be another mob in the centre of the Green Mill, and the dinner suit crowd would be in another little group. It was a funny mob, and they used to have about 20 redcoats chucker out for brawl started. And they used to take them downstairs underneath the blue and paste the life out and suspend them for so long till it's coming in. They'd never bar them, but they'd just teach them a lesson, see.
You played in the Green Mill for quite a while then?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But that was really ballroom dancing, you know, when the foxtrot, slow waltz, and quick step, and that wasn't showmanship there, that was actually playing.
Yeah. Was it jazz still, do you think?
So everything was jazz in that fun, not this, but it's all jazz to me. Anything jazz means rhythm music, eh? In which, you know, it originated in the old Dixieland stuff, originated in America and so forth with the Negroes, because they had a natural flair for ear playing, see?
That was West End Blues by Louis Armstrong's Hot Five, recorded in June 1928. This was one of the landmark recordings of jazz. It was released in Australia on the Parlophone Rhythm Style series. George Dobson got his start in Melbourne dance bands playing the trumpet.
I went to the Green Mill with an American trumpet player had the band by the name of Joe Watson, quite a good trumpet player. That was about a 10-piece band. Some good players in that band too. That lasted for about quite a few months, and then another guy took it over by the name of Vic Wood, Sydney bass player, and
The Green Mill was quite a large dance hall, wasn't it?
oh yeah, quite a large place, and quite a naughty place too. You know, for Saturday night it was really jumping. You know,
Yeah.
and I always remember one night the lights went out, everything. No, we had to bus go a few numbers. And all the lights went out and the music's down to all the lights in the hall, because it was a huge hall accommodating probably about at least 2,000 dancers there. Well, you know, mostly young people, and they weren't all together the elite type either, you know.
Yeah.
And oh my golly, when the lights went out, I can remember it now. The girls were being chased around, the fellas were fighting each other, and there was all sorts of fun and games going on, you know.
The dancing craze led to some bizarre excesses. In August 1927, thousands flocked to the Green Mill to watch the unedifying spectacle of an exhausted man trying to break 100 hours continuous dancing. The silly season got into full swing in 1928, as the following headings from the Argus show.
6th of February, B. Nichols dances 100 hours on floor. 16th of April, B. Preston dances 120 hours in Katoomba. 30th of April, B. Angus dances 135 hours at Adelaide. 1st of May, S. Matz dances 136 hours at Mount Gambier. 17th of May, T. Milton arrested for imposing on public, continues dancing in cell. 26th of May, E. Sunderland to attempt dance from Geelong to Melbourne. 12th June, road dancing contest at Perth. 16th of June, D. Young dances from Hurstville to Martin Place. 26th of June, B. Angus, 142 hours non-stop at Broken Hill.
Complaints were frequently made in letters to the newspapers. Well before electric amplification was invented, jazzers were accused of making weird, loud and discordant midnight noises. Why should honest workers have to tolerate the carousals of layabouts, they demanded in letters to the Argus. Why not, retorted others, less impressed with the utter worthiness and ingrained respectability of the Melbourne mind, and who favoured brighter leisure hours to dispel Melbourne's drab commercial gloom. Proprietors of several Melbourne dance halls were warned in 1926 that exhibitions of dancing were deemed to be cabaret entertainment, and thereby rendered themselves liable to prosecution for breaches of the Theatres Act of 1890, under which every person in such a place could be arrested as a rogue and a vagabond. Court proceedings sometimes took an unexpected turn, though. One judge was so intrigued by a plaintiff's complaints of loud jazz band with accompanying animal imitations and merrymaking that he held the application over for a week so he could see for himself. The law also tried to ensure that clubs and halls were safe for the public by forcing them to provide adequate exits and fire protection. The period of Australian jazz from 1923 to 1928 was an exciting time for musicians and the public. Dance musicians made the most of their chances to hear and play with visiting Americans, and the public were captivated by the infectious rhythms of the overseas bands and by some of their own bands too. Jazz was the spearhead of the dancing boom, and radio and records brought it to everyone's attention. As soon as jazz appeared, some people wished it would go away. All over the world, jazz had its opponents. It was criticised for everything from its supposed lack of musical qualities to its effects on morals, and it was accused of causing all the changes which alarmed older generations.
The family and I don't get on because I went into jazz, not the nicer class of music. Because, well, you know what sort of family I'm talking about.
That was Billy Weston, a trombonist who came into dance music in the late 30s. Under the heading Garbage Destructor for Jazz, Australian Variety magazine of December 1919 denounced jazz as
merely a combination of noise, discord, and horseplay.
And reported from America, a female vaudeville pianist decrying jazz as
but the illegitimate outpourings of a brain either diseased by the use of drugs or accelerated by a desire to create pandemonium.
jazz is to pass out, predicted Everyone's magazine in March 1922, the year Louis Armstrong left New Orleans to join King Oliver in Chicago.
Australia should rejoice that the craze for absurd syncopation, like the futurist and cubist periods, is to be but short-lived.
It continued hopefully, and revealed that a prominent instrumentalist had told them that 7/10 of the jazz bands of Sydney were comprised of men who had little or no knowledge of music or tempo. The members of the Sydney Conservatorium of Music were curious to listen to ragtime, but one of them, who was touring the USA, despised jazz as
the most abominable distortion of musical sounds known to humanity,
and feared for the effects of jazz on morals, warning that it was responsible for
perverting the taste, weakening the moral fibre, and injuring mind and body.
Many attacks stemmed from a sense of insecurity caused by the Great War. 60,000 dead Australian soldiers helped to shatter the idea that Western civilization was on the road of inevitable progress. Where formerly society had seemed to march forward with God's blessing and every new invention added to the greater glory of mankind, now that seemed to be threatened, and sometimes progress itself appeared to be a threat. Jazz, which symbolised the period like nothing else, became a focus for doubts about modern developments. People who thought about such things generally found evidence of a general malaise afflicting the world. Fritz Hart of the Melbourne Conservatorium attacked the modern world in these terms.
The vicious influence of the jazz spirit is to be discerned today not only in music, but also in painting, poetry, and to a certain extent in sculpture. To me it appears to be an almost entirely evil thing.
Jazz was linked with communism and with attempts to undermine religion. Not everyone shared this extreme view, nor considered that everything should be condemned just because it was different and happening in the 20th century. The Age newspaper of 31 May 1919 carried a short story remarking on the era's shallowness and the constant desire for superficial stimulation. It concluded with a jibe at the fearful ones.
While they are dealing with jazz, why don't they mention jazz painting and jazz poetry and jazz dressing and jazz music, as well as jazz thinking and reading and revolution making and all the rest? What's the good of condemning just one jazz thing when they've got the chance of denouncing a jazz era?
New developments seem to trouble entertainment personalities least of all. A special jazz week at the Globe Theatre inaugurated the premiere in August 1919 of the Australian-made film Does the Jazz Lead to Destruction?, a comedy filmed at Rushcutters Bay, which was originally titled Why Mabel Learned to Jazz. This is a record of Paul Whiteman and his orchestra playing Felix the Cat, recorded in May 1928, featuring Bix Beiderbecke and Frankie Trumbauer.
come home to our flat. You fascinate me with your funny meow. I'll feed you catnip and sweet milk from the cow. Felix, Felix, in our backyard, you can hang up your hat. Make your pillow underneath a pussy willow. Felix, Felix the cat.
Established social patterns changed a lot between the wars. Alcohol at dances provoked adverse reactions from many quarters. Technically, the palais were all dry. The big crowds which came to dance were supposed to drink tea or lemonade all night, and of course that wouldn't do. Patrons often tried to smuggle drink inside, and musicians were among the best offenders. An instrument case served ideally for smuggling in drinks. Merv Atchison, Sydney saxophonist, recalls his personal experience.
The idea is that in the early days, you had two places to play jazz. You had the palais, where you had to smuggle your liquor in unless it was a ball night where they had a special licence, and you had the small nightclubs, which were illegal to start with. I mean, it was all right to run a nightclub and sell food, but there was no liquor allowed to be sold at all after 6 p.m. by anybody. So the device by which this was overcome was to have fictitious names stuck on every bottle of liquor in the place. And when you went in, you'd order 6 bottles of beer, and they'd give you the bottles of beer with the name of Jones or Smith or something on it, which were ostensibly ordered before 6 o'clock, paid for by 6 o'clock, by somebody who hasn't turned up to pick them up.
Attacks on jazz were bound up with opinions as to what was in good taste. Taste is notoriously affected by age and aspirations. This was clearly observable in cinemas. Everyone's magazine snootily stated,
"There is every evidence that many motion picture houses throughout Australia are fostering a taste for classical music amongst their audiences. These theatres are attended by a different class of people than attend cinemas in which the musical part of the programme is sadly neglected or is composed entirely of red-hot jazz."
Albert Casabon, conductor at the Prince Edward Theatre, judged his listeners to be the best people, attending
because they know they will get the best music. I think that other than straight jazz should be confined to vaudeville. Jazz is played at the Prince Edward, but it is played straight.
You can guess what that meant. By contrast, Will Quintrell at the Sydney Tivoli estimated that
95% of Tivoli patrons are more or less tickled pink with jazz.
The legitimate musician was a bit jealous of the new players coming on.
Yeah.
And they used to call the legitimate musicians the long ears.
Yeah.
Now it's reversed now, see, the long ears. And when we did go into the bloomin' club, they wouldn't look nor talk to you. We're all a new breed altogether. We're something. So we made our club across at in Sydney, across the pub on the opposite side, and we'd all meet there, and we'd give them jobs. Like you'd come in and say, "What are you doing Saturday night?" And I think, right, there's a job at so-and-so. When so-and-so, we'd get paid there, have a couple of pots, and off we'd go, see? But then, eventually, the younger players, or the listeners, got into the club, and they were just welcome as what the older players were, you see?
But originally...
No, we're isolated from... Well, we were a breed on our own. Oh, crikey, yes, to wear something new. The turkey goblet sounds and all this blooming thing.
Yeah.
academics despaired for the future if the young were allowed to continue in their way. P.F. Rowland, in an article entitled 5 Thoughts on Education, wrote,
"Speaking generally, in music, do we ask anything more than jazz? In art, the jazz equivalents. In literature, the latest naughtiness in novel form. Is not this due to the fact that in our age, the cultural subjects are being crowded out of our curriculum?"
Jazz and all that it symbolised was not considered worthy enough to be cultural. Another academic anxiously wrote an article called Pacific Penetrations, which concluded,
"We dance to their tune, and the Pied Piper is leading our young race to the sounds of syncopated music into the hillside, where our characteristics may be lost forever."
one of those. He's handsome as can be, but he worries me. Now this schoolboy is no fool boy. Gee, what that boy knows. He's off in his Latin and Greek, out in his shaking his weak. 'Cause when I feel like loving, and I've gotta have some loving, he's so near yet so far. He's so unusual. When I want some kisses, and I'm burning up for kisses, he says, no, let me go. So unusual, might as well be by myself as in his company. When we go out walking, he gets miles ahead of me. Still I'm mad about him, and I just can't do without him. He's so unusual, he drives me wild. When we're in the moonlight, he says, I don't like the moonlight. Let's not park in the dark. He's so unusual. And when we're in a taxi, he converses with the chauffeur. Why don't he talk to me? He's so unusual. Now I know lots of boys who might be crazy over me if they only had this fellow's opportunity. I would let him pet me, but the darn fool doesn't let me. He's so unusual, he drives me wild.
That was Des Tooley singing He's So Unusual, recorded in December 1929 with Abe Romaine on alto sax. Harry Bluck remembers attitudes towards the saxophone in Perth.
The saxophone was still that unacceptable instrument.
Now, I remember when I was in Melbourne, in that band in Melbourne, the end of 1923 and 24, in the Union there wouldn't be more than about 4 or 5 saxophone players. Today there'd be hundreds, the same as Sydney.
There was no schooling here. There was nothing
of music
available here.
What about just your ordinary?
There was plenty of classical teachers.
Yeah.
There were quite a lot of classical teachers here who understandably just shunned the thought, the majority of them, I would say, if not the total scene of them, majority of them, were very intolerant to anybody who was caught up in the jazz scene. Most of us that grew up in Western Australia like this suffered this, and we had to sort of left to our own devices, and I think we became pretty much of a rugged lot of individualists.
Wally Hadley, a banjo player from Perth, had a similar experience.
Well, in the initial stages, I must confess that there was a tendency amongst certain musicians to try and hi-hat the dance musician, because they more or less looked down as being a sort of inferior capabilities. But as time went on, it became quite evident that the techniques that the dance musician has been forced to follow and adopt was gradually overhauling some of the technical qualifications that the legit man had. And on many occasions, the legit man found that he had to turn around and do a little bit of practice at home to stay up with the dance man.
A few independent-minded classical musicians defended jazz. Percy Granger, Australia's internationally renowned pianist and composer, and Bernard Heinz, professor at the Melbourne Conservatorium, both publicly argued that jazz was a most excellent and beautiful music. Heinz thought that jazz was a modern equivalent to the minuet and waltz and other old dances. Granger advocated that Australia and the USA were now presented with the opportunity to form a new type of orchestra, which would be an extremely expressive and soulful medium if they utilised such modern instruments as the saxophone. However, among classical musicians, Heinz and Granger were in the minority. A curious aspect to Heinz and Granger's remarks was that no one from the dance scene in the 1920s championed what they had to say. Overseas, Every chance comment that Granger made about jazz was seized upon to bolster it up. In Australia, while musicians were not about to give up syncopation for 1 minute, they were slow to come to its defence. The Australian Band and Orchestra News of July 1926 feebly suggested that since jazz consisted of joy, animation, zip and zest,
then why should Professor Bernard Heinz and others bother to try to hear anything in it?
This program has looked at some of the social changes occurring in Australia between the wars, which jazz and dance music contributed to. Next time, we'll be looking at how jazz interacted with some of Australia's attitudes to race and at the onset of the Depression.